In this episode of the Health Momentum Podcast, let me start with a question that may feel uncomfortably familiar. What if the problem in your clinic is not how many patients you see, but how many of those visits actually get paid? I was speaking with a physician not long ago who said something that stayed with me. He told me, "We are doing more than ever. The clinic is full every day, but somehow it feels like we are working harder just to stand still." There was no lack of demand, no drop in quality, but something in the system was quietly eroding the outcome. And that is where the conversation begins. Because what we are seeing across clinics today is not a clinical problem. It is not even a volume problem. It is a system problem. Specifically, the space between care delivered and payment received has become more fragile, more complex, and far less forgiving. Claim denials are rising. Many clinics are seeing initial denial rates in the range of 10 to 20%. Think about that for a moment. 1 out of every 5 claims may not go through on the first attempt. Not because the care was inappropriate, not because the patient did not need it, but because the system demands precision at a level that most workflows were never designed to handle. And here is the part that often goes unnoticed. Most denials are not created at the moment of submission. They are created much earlier. They begin at scheduling, when eligibility is not fully verified. They continue at intake when information is incomplete. They deepen during documentation, when small gaps or inconsistencies appear. By the time the claim is submitted, the outcome is already determined. Yet most clinics are still trying to solve this problem at the very end of the process. They hire more billing staff. They outsource revenue cycle work. They invest in follow-up teams. And while those efforts may improve collections at the margin, they do not address the root issue. They are correcting errors that should never have existed in the first place. So the real question becomes this: what would change if we stopped thinking about denial management as a cleanup function and started treating it as a design problem? Because that is where the shift is happening. The most effective clinics today are not simply better at chasing down denied claims. They are better at preventing them from ever being created. They are moving validation upstream. They are embedding checks earlier in the workflow. They are aligning clinical documentation with payer expectations before submission ever happens. And this is not about adding complexity. It is about removing friction. It is about asking a different set of questions. Not what got denied, but why was this claim vulnerable from the start? Not how do we fix this, but how do we make sure it does not happen again? I have seen clinics transform their financial stability by making relatively simple but intentional changes. Verifying eligibility before the visit instead of after. Standardizing documentation expectations across providers. Creating feedback loops so that denial patterns inform clinical workflows, not just billing reports. What is striking is that these changes do not require more effort. They require better alignment. And this is where technology is beginning to play a more meaningful role, not as a replacement for clinical judgment, but as a layer that supports it. Systems that can identify potential issues before submission. Tools that can guide documentation in real time. Processes that reduce the need for rework rather than accelerating it. But even with technology, the mindset shift is what matters most. If we continue to view billing as something that happens after care, we will continue to struggle with the same patterns. If we begin to see it as something that is integrated into care delivery, the entire system starts to behave differently. There is also a deeper implication here, one that goes beyond revenue. Every hour spent correcting claims is an hour not spent improving patient care. Every delay in reimbursement adds pressure to already strained systems. Every layer of administrative friction contributes to burnout, not just for physicians, but for the entire care team. So this is not just a financial conversation. It is an operational and human one, and perhaps even an ethical one. How much administrative complexity should stand between a patient receiving care and a physician being compensated for it? At what point does the system begin to work against the very people it is meant to support? These are not abstract questions anymore. They are showing up in daily practice. Looking ahead, it is clear where things are going. More automation, more payer-driven rules, more real-time validation, The revenue cycle is becoming less of a back-office function and more of an embedded infrastructure within clinical workflows, which means the clinics that adapt early will not just survive. They will operate with a level of clarity and stability that others will struggle to achieve. So let me bring this back to you. If you are seeing rising denials, if your team is spending more time on rework, if your revenue feels inconsistent despite strong patient demand, it may not be a performance issue. It may be a design issue, and that is something you can change. Before we close, I want to leave you with one question. Where in your current workflow are errors being introduced that you are only discovering later? Take a moment to think about that. If this conversation resonates with you, I would like to hear your perspective. What is the biggest challenge you are facing when it comes to billing and reimbursement in your practice? Leave a comment and share your experience. Your insight may help another physician facing the same challenge. And if you believe this conversation needs to reach more people in our field, share this episode with a colleague. These are not isolated issues. They are systemic, and the more we talk about them, the better we can address them. This is how change begins. Thank you for being part of this conversation.